And I'm not going to talk a lot about navigation. I'm going to just go directly to Ascribe Coder because I want to focus on Ascribe Coder today. So I'm clicking on my Ascribe Coder icon there, and I'm going directly into my Ascribe Coder webinar 2015, question 8. This is a dislikes question for the static hair study that most of you are pretty familiar with. Okay, so this is Ascribe Coder. And to start out, I just want to talk a little bit about the layout, then I'll talk about coding, and then we'll talk about some customization and some codebook editing in Ascribe Coder. So again, today, focusing on the basics, just doing a general overview. All right? So the first thing about Ascribe Coder is the navigation icon. Most of you are familiar with this already, but to get out of Ascribe Coder, you do need to access the navigation icon. And you can go back to the questions page. You can go to any of the privilege-based navigation tools, or you can go to any of the software, pieces of software, coding tools that we have in Ascribe. All right? So if I pop back out to the questions page, just to show for those of you that might want to go to Supervisor Studies questions, you can pop right back into Ascribe Coder by right-clicking and choosing Ascribe Coder. All right. So the navigation icon, I think we're all pretty familiar with. It's usually at the top left-hand side of the screen. So Ascribe Coder was set up, again, it was set up originally to an enhanced version of Review Responses. So it's kind of laid out the same way. We've got the code book over here on the right side of the screen. You know, our nets are bold. Our codes are kind of nested under the nets. You know, very, very similar to Review Responses. All right. The left side of the screen is going to be our responses. So our responses will be returned over here. And then the bottom pane down here is our question information. We give you the study ID, the question ID. We actually allow you, if you'd like, to edit the question directly from this page. So it's, we're trying to keep everything that a coder might do right here in Ascribe Coder. Also, just give you more information about that question. Above each pane, or above the codebook pane and the response pane, we have a toolbar. So we have a toolbar for the codebook. These are our codebook tools. And we have a toolbar for our responses. These are our response tools. I'll be going more into that as we move forward. One more thing about the layout of the screen. We can actually resize the screen, and the resize sticks. So this is our little resizer bar. Okay? And that resize sticks. That means that if I were to leave and come back in and I had resized it like this, it would be like this tomorrow. It would be like this in 2 hours, whatever, until I change it again. Also, the question information can be resized. And the reason you might want to resize this is if you were showing responses from shared code books and you wanted to see every question that those responses were coming from. All right. Also on the resizer bar is this little button to close. So if you want to give yourself a little more screen real estate, you can close that button, and it'll tell you that you're only showing responses from one question right now. All right. That's your prerogative whether you want to leave that open or closed. All right. So now let's get into actual coding in Ascribe. So the first thing you want to do, how do you return responses? You're going to click on the little search icon up here, the little magnifying glass. And if you hover over that magnifying glass, you'll see that Control-S is actually a shortcut to access the search dialog box. Here's the search dialog box. To talk a second about searching. A couple of things you should know about searching. Of course, if you want to search by regular expression, you will want to toggle this little regular expression box on. That's what we use by default in Review Responses was the expression tester. Okay? If you leave that box blank, you can then choose whether you want to return your coded and uncoded responses. So if the show only box is blank, you're going to be returning coded and uncoded responses. So if I do that, I'm returning all 348 responses, and I'm returning my coded and my uncoded. I think there's a few coded in here somewhere. Okay? If I want to show just my uncoded, then I'll choose Show Only Uncoded. So now I've got 334 uncoded. So 96% is uncoded. If I want to return my coded, then I will choose Show Only Responses with Any Code Applied. and that's going to return all of my coded responses. So 14 are coded, or 4%. Okay, those are the three basics that I want to talk about in our search today. You know, again, keeping it blank, the show only in its blank, is both coded and uncoded, and that's a question we ask. It's a frequently asked question that comes through support often. So just want to make sure we touch on that. Then of course we have uncoded, and then responses with any code applied. Okay, so notice that when these responses are returned, actually, you know what? Let me bring up my uncoded real quick here. There we go, back to uncoded. There we go. Okay, so talk a little bit about coding. So to code in a Scribe Coder, we have probably 4 or 5 methods of coding. Really, one of those methods is drop and drag, or drag and drop, I should say. So I'm going to drag my nothing code and drop it on respondent 10,001. So what you're seeing over here, I should explain the verbatim pane or the response pane a little more. What you're seeing is the respondent ID in red, so respondent 10,001. The verbatim is in bold, and the verbatim has this little icon in front of it. We're going to talk about that more in a sec. And then the code that you applied falls beneath the verbatim. Nothing is the code that I applied. If I hover over that code, I see all this information about the code. It gives me the output ID, input ID, who applied it, the date they applied it, the time they applied it, and the type of coding that took place. Was it manual? Was it a duplicate? Was it auto-coded? However it was coded. Okay? So, again, the first way to talk about coding is drag drop. Okay? We can also code by selecting multiple responses. So I've selected 1, 2, 3, 4 responses here. If I click on a code, so I select the responses and then click on the actual text of the code to apply it. So I just applied the expensive price code to 4 responses. Okay? So I select responses and click on the code to apply it. If I click on another code, it's going to apply to those 4 responses. Now I can actually undo what I just did by right-clicking and hit Remove Last Codes Applied and OK, and it removes those 4 responses that I just applied. All right. So one of the things to pay attention to is that as you're selecting responses, we keep a count up here to tell you you've got 4 responses selected. Okay. If you have responses selected and you click on a code, that code will be applied to the selected responses. That's probably the most important thing to remember as you're going through this. All right. If you're going to code by selecting and clicking. Okay. So the drag drop that we talked about before. I see down here that I have a code. I need to apply a code for the name of the product. I don't think I currently have a code for the name of the product, so what I'm going to do is just give that another mention. Okay? So I'm going to drag all other mentions to the name of the product and price to respondent 10,017. Notice that in drag drop, it's a 1 code to 1 response coding action. Okay? So when you drag and drop, that only applies to the response that you dropped it on. That code will only be applied to the response that you dropped it on. Okay? Even though I've got 4 selected, this all other mentions was not applied to the selected. To apply codes to the selected responses, you have to click on the code in the code book. The drag drop is a 1 at a time action. Okay? So you can drag from the code book to a response. You can also drag from one response to another. So I can drag this nothing code down here. And notice again that that nothing was only applied to the response that I dropped it on. Okay? So those are the 2 main ways that we code in a Scribe Coder. There's one other that I want to talk about, and that is the regular expression coding. So you might notice that some of these responses are underlined. And when I hover over those responses, it suggests a code for me. So let me do that on price. So when I hover over price, which is underlined, it's suggesting the expensive price code. If I click on it, that expensive price code is applied. This is very similar to what we have in the single response coder interface on a one-at-a-time basis. But here, it does it for all the responses at once and for the entire code book at once. So those regular expressions are actually built in behind the codes here. Okay? So I just wanted, that's another way that we can code, by accepting the suggestion from the regular expressions. Okay, so removing codes or taking codes away. And another thing is I've still got one response selected here. I've got to pay attention to that. You notice how that guy kind of slipped from my screen. He's still here. So I'm going to do that so that I'm back to 0 responses selected. All right, so removing responses or codes from responses. So if you have codes that you'd like to remove, you can select them, right-click, say remove this code, then it'll remove just the one you clicked on, or this and all selected codes. Notice, too, that we have a count up here of the codes that are selected. So I'm going to do this and all selected codes, remove codes. That's one way to remove codes. You can also just grab the code and drag it to the code book. And that removes the code. Okay? Drag it, remove codes. Okay, so there's a few things that I want to talk about now with our customizations or our settings. Okay? I've been working in this in the default mode. But there's each user can customize this screen to work the way they, or to look the way they want it to look. All right? So we've talked about our search. I will talk briefly about search again. So my current search is to return uncoded responses. So if you hit search again, it's going to do that. It's going to return my uncoded responses without me having to go back and hit go here. Okay? Just to show you, that's the search again. I'm going to skip right on over here to my settings, and we're going to talk a little bit about settings. All right? So each user, one of the first things that I have trainees do when I'm training on a scribe coder is start in response settings and customize the screen to look the way they'd like it to look. The first thing I do is turn off this drag responses to copy coding. And let me just explain real quick what that does and why I turn it off. So if I've applied some number of codes to this response, and I've got drag responses to copy coding on, it will actually copy those 3 codes to another response, copy coding. Do I want to do it? I hit OK. It copied those 3 to that response. Again, I don't use that very often, and I really like to be able to highlight a piece of my response and add it to the notes. So I turn that off so that if I want to, I can highlight a piece of the response and add that piece to my notes field. Okay? And just since we're here, I can actually show you that note. Boom. So it just added, this seems bogus to me, to the notes field. All right? I like being able to do that, so I turn off the drag responses to copy coding. The notes field is another thing that I might turn on if I need to see the notes that someone else took, but if I need to take notes, then I would turn on the edit notes. And some of us do that. We actually track other mentions in our responses, or those mentions that can't be coded. So we might want to turn on the notes field for that. I'm going to turn it off for the rest of this presentation, though. All right. So yes, I turn off the drag responses to copy coding. Another thing that I do is place text on new line. I like to keep as many verbatims on my screen as possible, so I toggle that off. So now the respondent ID is actually in front of the verbatim. Okay? And some of you like the respondent ID in red. It's a distraction to some of you. We can actually change that respondent ID color by going over here to appearance and change it back to black if we like. But now I'll go back to the responses tab here. Okay. Some of us don't care about the respondent ID while we're coding, so you can actually turn that off. Some of us might want to have the question ID and the study ID while we're coding. And notice that as I do this, you know, these things appear and disappear. That's one of the coolest things I think about a scribe coder is that as we're customizing, we can see the effects if we've got some verbatims up over here. All right. So you notice that in front of the verbatim, we have this little verbatim icon. And I'm not going to go into great detail what that's for, but it gets in the way for a lot of us. We'd like more screen real estate. So we can hide that verbatim icon. So now, truly, we've removed a lot of the stuff that doesn't mean anything to us as we're coding. We've got the screen set up so we have the verbatim and the code book. And we can kind of get in the coding mode and just focus on that without all the other distractions. All right? So something else that was recently added is this alternate row color. So we had the request that we need a more distinction between the verbatims. So you can actually turn on the alternate row color if you like. All right? And now you should be able to differentiate and just code away. Okay, let me just look through here real quick. Yeah, let's now pop over to the Applied Codes tab and talk a little bit about the Applied Codes. Notice that as I'm going through here, this little applied code, or the information about the codes keeps popping up. Okay. That may drive you nuts. You may like that. So what this is doing is showing us any of the information about that applied code that we're not displaying on the screen. Okay? So we could display that information by going to the Applied Codes tab and saying Display Input ID, Output ID. And notice that as I do that, that little box shrinks. Username, date, and now coding method. So now we're not seeing that little box, okay? That's one way to do that. Another way to do that, to get rid of that little box, is to pop over to the Appearance tab and turn off Code Tooltips. When you turn off the Code Tooltips, you'll no longer get the information about the codes when you hover over them, or about the applied codes when you hover over them. While we're here, also in this little show box on the Appearance tab is the logo, the Ascribe Coder logo. If you prefer to remove that, you can also remove that and give yourself a little more screen. Okay, you get to show at least one more. In my case, I get to show one more verbatim when I remove that logo. All right, so let's pop back over here to Applied Codes and talk a little more about the options we have here. So I'm going to leave my output ID here because I like to see my output ID when I'm coding. I'm also going to turn on this Remove Codes button. I like having that because, you know, I don't want to have to go. For me, dragging the code to the code book it doesn't feel. It's not the thing I like to do. If I want to remove a code, I can actually click on the little trash can and hit Remove Codes. You know, trash can, remove codes. Plus, it reminds me of Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street, so I like that. Remove code. Now, you'll notice, again, another thing here. We've got this prompt for confirmation when removing single codes. A lot of times when we're working, we don't want to confirm every single code we're removing, so we can turn that off. And now, when I click, the codes are removed. Okay? We have that option because the delete button, if we click on the code and hit delete on the keyboard, it doesn't delete. The delete button doesn't work here. So that was a quick way to allow us to delete, delete a single code. All right? And that was prompt confirmation when removing single codes. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about code duplicates and what code duplicates means. To do that, I'm going to change my sort order. So I go up here to my sort filters and sorting, and I click on my sorting tab. So these are my filters and my sorting options. Okay? I am going to sort by verbatim length and then by verbatim. We've got a myriad of sorting options here. So if you if you want to display your verbatims in a certain order, you can come here and pretty much find just about any order that you'd like to sort them in. I'm not going to go over each of these. I just want to talk to it for a second. Okay? Again, I'm going to sort by verbatim length, then by verbatim. One thing I will point out that a lot of people don't realize is that you can sort by number of codes applied. That way, if you're coding a single mention and you want to bring the ones that have more than one code applied to the top, you can go to number of codes applied in a reverse sort. They'll come right to the top. You'll find those instantly. So a little digression there. Let's go back to the sort. When I change the sort, it doesn't apply automatically. I do need to do my search again, so my sort will apply. So now I'm sorting my verbatims. And you can see here, too, anytime we hover over our little statistics area here, we'll get this little flyout that tells us about our current search. It tells us about our sort. It'll tell us about our filter. Gives us all the information about the verbatims that are displayed. Okay? All right. So back to code duplicates. Notice that I've got quite a few nones here. And I can code those one at a time if I like, or I could select each of them and click on the code if I liked. I could even right-click and say select all same, right, and apply that code. Okay? But those are all kind of manual and maybe not the way we'd like to do it. So what I can do is turn on code duplicates. And I'm going to turn on code duplicates all, which just means that any time that I code a duplicate, even those responses that I'm not currently displaying that are duplicates will be coded. Okay? You do have also the option for just coding the displayed responses, coding the duplicate displayed responses. Okay? So in this case, with this nothing, let me just click on it. I'm going to take the suggestion, and you'll notice that it tells me up here that last coded was 41. So there were 40 duplicates, and you can see that here if you look down to like the 5th item in this flyout. Total last coded 41. Duplicates last coded 40 because I coded one response. They're actually 41 coded. So you can always see how many you last coded up here, okay? So again, the code duplicates will only code exact text matches. You'll notice that the nothings with a dot behind them were not coded because, again, it has to be an exact text match. So I can code these guys. There we go. All right? So that's how code duplicates work. It's up to you whether you turn that on or not. We've got a cool feature coming out on Friday that actually allows us to search for distinct verbatims. And I'm not going to go over that today in detail, but it actually puts all the verbatims together that are duplicates. So it makes that even a little more easier. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the Appearance tab a little more and what we have displayed on the screen here. So some of the feedback we had is that the toolbar up here is too busy and we're not using all these tools, so why are we displaying them all? So on the Appearance tab, we have the option to remove some of those tools. So we can remove the print tool. We can remove the filters and sorting tool, the little funnel. We can remove the sources tool, which allows us to grab questions from shared code books. We can remove the word list, right? And then we can actually remove our search counts, and we can remove our search settings. Our search settings just tell us, is there a new search, and that's actually a shortcut to the search. This is actually a shortcut to the sorting, and then tells us how many were last coded, okay? And if we click on it, it shows us those last coded. All right? So one of the things, it's up to you what you want to show. I do just about always leave the search results counts because I like to know how many responses I have selected. I like to know how many codes I have selected. I like to know how many responses I've returned. All right? These three tools, the search, search again, and the settings are always, always, always in your toolbar. If you have hidden those tools, you can still access them. You can access them through the navigation icon, clicking on Tools, and Print. And there it is. There's your print option. Okay? While we're on our print option, just a little what you can do with this. The print option allows you to export responses. Okay? And that export depends on your response settings. So if you want to export the question ID, study ID, question ID, and respondent ID, you can turn all of those on. Okay? And then if we go back to the print option, we can print selected responses. I don't have any selected, but that's okay. The displayed responses, so all 325 displayed responses, all responses for the current questions, and there's an S on that just in case you're showing responses from shared code books. And you've got multiple questions represented here. All responses for current studies, and then responses for code selected in the code book. And you can output these either to Excel or Word, and when you output it, again, there's a column for everything that you're showing. So study ID, question ID, respondent ID, verbatim, output ID, and description. So code output ID and code description, since I'm showing both of those. The verbatim reviewed always shows up. A lot of times we'll just delete that out of there. And you have just a verbatim report for those responses that we're showing. Okay? All right. So again, these tools, if you're not using them all the time, you can turn them on or off through the Appearance Tools options. Another thing that we can do is change the font of our verbatim, translation, transcription, notes, related responses, applied codes, and then everything else. Okay? The and everything else, notice that I changed it's all the other things we're displaying. Okay? There we go. All right. So the verbatim by default is, actually everything by default is in Calibri. That is the most legible font on today's monitors. And the size is 12. The verbatim is automatically in bold. If you don't like to read the verbatim in bold, you can turn that on or off. Again, you can just customize this to look and feel the way you want it to look. Okay. So now we've talked quite a bit about coding. I do want to talk about swapping, so I'm going to bring up my coded responses. Okay, and let's say that I was told, and I'm going to change this because it's a little overwhelming to have my study ID, my question ID, and my respondent ID there. Okay, so let's say that I was told that I need to swap my nothing code that's applied to the NA for don't know. I can do that by selecting the codes that I want to swap, okay, and then grabbing the code that I'd like to replace it with and dropping it on the code. And it's going to swap those out. Since I had code duplicates on, it swapped them all. But I should tell you that here, if I decide I want to swap all of these guys for a certain code, okay, I can select them all and then pull that code over and swap them out. Okay, so that's how the swap works. All right, so now we'll talk for a second about the codebook side of the screen. Let me see how much time I have here. Oh yeah, we're doing well. Okay, so the codebook. You'll notice the first thing about the codebook tools up here is the lock, okay? With the codebook locked, there are some things that we can do. We can add a new code. So we can right-click. Let's say we need to add a new code about makes hair dirty. We can right-click, insert code, and then, that was funny, makes hair dirty, or leaves hair dirty, whatever. I'm losing my coding lingo there. Leaves hair dirty. All right, so I can add a new code. I can edit the properties of any code. The new code I added, I can make it red if I like. I can add an expression for it if I like, dirty, okay? So I can do that. I can right-click on that and say search expression, and it would bring up any uncoded responses that have dirty, if I did that right, that have dirty in it. All right, Actually, it's bringing up the responses with any code applied that have dirty because I had left it that way. There we go. Now it's bringing up any of the responses that have the word dirty in it. Okay, so again, if we right-click and hit search expression, it's going to bring up the responses that match that expression. So I can do that. One of the things that I wanted to talk about before I got into that was actually your codebook display. So under your codebook settings, one of the things you might want to do immediately is turn on your counts and your output ID. Notice that when you turn on the counts, this up here is very useful when you're coding because it keeps a running count of how many responses you have coded out of your total response base. So 73 out of 348 are coded, or 21%. Also, I like to turn on the output ID as I'm coding again. I just like to know that. So those are two of the settings that I do suggest you turn on for your codebook. All right. So again, what we can do with the codebook locked, we can add a code. We can edit the information about any of the codes, not just the code I added, any of the codes. We can delete a code that hasn't been applied. Okay. So if we decide we want to get rid of one of these codes, we can right-click on it and delete it. Okay? Those are the things we can do with the codebook unlocked. We can also return responses. So if I want to see the responses that have nothing applied to it, I can right-click on the nothing code and hit search any, and it's going to bring up all the responses that have the nothing code applied to it. If I want the ones that have the don't know, hit search any, all the codes that have don't know applied to it. Okay? If I want to bring up the ones that have all other mentions and expensive price, I can hit search all. There might not be any. There's one that has all other mentions and expensive price. Okay. So we know we can add a code to the code book. I'm often asked, well, how do you add a net to the code book? Right-click, insert code below, and I'm going to call this Laura's net, toggle on the net, hit OK. To add a code to that net, right-click on the net, insert code into. And there's Laura's new code. Okay? So we can do all these with the codebook locked. But now, what if I wanted to move more codes into Laura's net? How would I go about doing that? I would need to unlock the codebook. Okay? So to move codes into Laura's net, I can drag and drop. Make sure that it's at the right level there. I can drag and drop individual codes. Or I can select multiples. Okay? So notice again, I've got a count up here. I've got 3 codes selected now. Right-click on Laura's net, move selection into. And it'll put those 3 codes, take them out of their current nets, and move them into Laura's net. To move them back, you would need to drag them individually and put them back where they go. Okay? This method of moving it takes a minute to get used to, but it's very, very useful when you're trying to restructure a code book. And again, what you do is select the codes that you'd like to move, click on the code you'd like to move them below, and then hit Move Selection Below. If you're moving them into a net, click on the net that you'd like to move them into, Move Selection Into. All right? So that's how we move multiple codes. Unlock the code book. You do have to have supervisor privilege to unlock the code book. Unlock the code book, and then move your codes around. Okay? Also, if you want to renumber your code book, you have to unlock the code book and then select what it is you want to renumber. In this case, I want to renumber my codes. Select the renumber option, and I'm going to renumber them starting at 101 today. Hit renumber. Boom. Codes renumbered. You might notice that 998 and 999 did not get renumbered because I have them ignored here. Okay? This is kind of just the same as review responses. I just wanted to show you how you go about doing that. All right. Lock my code again, code book back. And talk for just a second about the other tools we have on the code book. If you want to export your code book, you can export or print your code book. Most popular is Excel. Again, it's going to export whatever you have showing, just as the response side exports whatever you have showing. All right? And really, the other tools, yeah, I'm not going to get into those in great detail today. But what I'll do now is open the floor for any questions that might have come up. Julie, were there any questions?
Not yet, but if anybody has questions, just type them into the chat box and we'll be glad to address them.
All right. Oh, I see there's a question. Can you show us how to remove codes again? So let me go through that one more time. So to remove codes, I'm going to bring up codes with any code applied. Hit OK. And you can remove a code. So I've turned on, again, I've turned on the little remove code button. Okay? And you can remove codes. You can remove codes by clicking on that remove code button. You can remove codes one at a time this way. Okay. You can select multiples. Well, these are duplicates. I've got my duplicates on. You can select multiples and right-click and say remove this code or remove this and all selected codes. But again, because I have duplicates on, it's going to tell me, hey, you got some duplicates. You've got 3 selected and 45 duplicates. Let's remove those. So you remove codes that way. One of the things you can do is select all your responses and then right-click and select all codes in the selected responses. This is a really good way to completely remove all of your codes. And then right-click, remove this and all selected codes. Then all your codes are removed. And now everything's uncoded, which is fine. But if you're applying codes, let's say that you inadvertently, you've got a number of things selected here, right? And you're up here, and you're like, you know what, that gets the nothing code. And you click on the nothing code. And really, I really like to have, not that. Sorry. I like to have that on so I know how many I last coded. So it tells me I last coded 61. I'm like, oh no, I maybe didn't want to code 61. So when I do something like that, I can right-click and say remove last codes applied, and it would remove just the last codes I applied. But if I wanted to completely uncode all of those responses I last coded, I could do that as well. Okay? So it just removed all of those last codes I applied. So those are a few of the ways to remove codes. All right. Anything else come up, Julie?
No, Laura.
All right. Okay. If there are any other questions or anything else that you'd like to talk about, just let me know, and we'll go over it. Looking forward to having any feedback from you, and we will be doing this webinar again today at 2. The recording of this webinar will be published on the YouTube account. Thank you again for your time today. See you soon. Bye, everyone.